There was always something elusive about the quiet order of my days, a rhythm that comforted me, but also, in moments I rarely admitted, pressed in with a kind of emptiness. My marriage was steady, almost ritualistic in its predictability. The rooms of our home reflected that careful stability, everything in its place, everything arranged with a certain gentle precision. I had long ago accepted that my life would be shaped by these boundaries, by the smooth routines of coffee in the morning, errands in the afternoon, and polite conversations over dinner with my husband, whose presence was as familiar as it was distant. In that routine, I became nearly invisible to myself. Hiring a housekeeper seemed like a practical choice, almost an afterthought, a solution to clutter and dust, a little extra help to keep the corners bright. When she arrived for the first time, I noticed the ease in her posture, the subtle confidence in the way she moved from room to room. She was younger than me, but she carried herself with a sense of purpose, not rushed or flustered, just quietly certain. I watched her as she worked, noting the light touch of her hands on the delicate fabric of curtains, the way she swept her hair back when she bent to pick something up, the soft hum she carried under her breath as she dusted the shelves. She did not linger or invade my space, but her presence changed the air in the house, brought a subtle current that I could not quite name. I caught myself lingering in rooms where she worked, drawn by an inexplicable curiosity. I told myself it was simply to check her progress, to make sure she understood what needed attention, but the truth was softer, stranger. There was a comfort in watching someone else tend to the details of my world, someone whose presence felt almost like a gentle disturbance, a ripple across the still surface of my solitude. The sunlight seemed warmer when it touched her hair, the space around her more alive. I began to notice the way her laughter, quiet and rare, left an afterglow in the room long after she had left it. Days blurred together, marked by her visits and the subtle shift they brought to the house. Sometimes, after she had gone, I would walk into a room and feel that something essential had been rearranged. Not the placement of a vase or the order of books, but a feeling, a faint spark that trailed in her wake. I found myself thinking about her in the in-between times, wondering what she might notice next. If she would catch the way I left a silk scarf draped over a chair, or whether she understood the kind of silence that lingered in a room long after conversation had ended. There was never anything overt or spoken, only the sense that the air between us had become charged with something unspoken and delicate, like the anticipation before a summer storm. My husband rarely noticed these small changes, absorbed in his own routines and distractions, but for me, they became a quiet thread running beneath the surface of my days. I realized, as I watched her move through my home, that I was searching for something, attention, perhaps, or recognition, or simply a spark of connection that had gone missing in the tidy comfort of my married life. It was in these moments, watching her hands smooth the bedsheets or arrange the pillows, that I began to feel the first stirrings of desire. Not the sharp, insistent kind, but a gentle ache, a longing that curled quietly inside me, waking something I thought I had safely buried. The boundaries of my carefully constructed world began to blur in her presence, and I found myself waiting for the next small disruption, for the next sign that the stillness of my life could be touched by something wild, something wonderfully out of place. With each of her visits, the quiet distance between us began to shrink in ways so subtle I almost convinced myself I was imagining it. The routines of my days took on a new texture, infused with a sense of expectation that made the ordinary seem almost electric. I found myself paying attention to the time, listening for the sound of her car in the driveway, the gentle thud of the front door, the soft shuffle of her steps on the hallway rug. There was a secret pleasure in knowing she would be there, moving through the house with her gentle purpose, a pleasure I guarded closely, not daring to examine too closely. I watched her more openly now, lingering in the kitchen while she wiped the counters or refilled the fruit bowl, feigning interest in the news or half-read book, but in truth absorbed by the way her hands moved, the way her eyes would dart up and meet mine for the briefest instant before flickering away. Our conversations were few, mostly practical instructions, but every word felt like it held another meaning just below the surface, a coded message neither of us dared to say out loud. Sometimes, as she reached for a high shelf or knelt to sweep under the furniture, I would feel my heart quicken, my breath growing shallow at the sight of her body moving with casual strength and grace. She seemed not to notice, but there was a new hesitancy in the way she looked at me sometimes, a flicker of curiosity or maybe caution, and I wondered if she felt the charge that hummed in the air between us. Little by little, I started leaving things out. Sometimes deliberately, sometimes by accident, but always with a trace of hope that she would touch them, notice them, understand something about me that I could not say. A silk robe draped over the edge of the bed, a delicate lace bra folded neatly atop a stack of clothes, perfume bottles left uncapped on the vanity. These were not just objects, but invitations, subtle signals cast out into the private tide that ran between us. I watched for her reaction, searching her face for any sign that she saw me not just as a client, but as a woman, as someone worth noticing. I began to notice her, too, in new ways. The way her hair slipped loose from its tie as she bent over the bathtub, the tiny dimple that appeared in her cheek when she concentrated, the soft flush on her skin after climbing the stairs with a basket of laundry. My body betrayed me in small ways, a warmth spreading through my chest at her laughter, a tremor in my hand when our fingers brushed as she handed me a folded towel. Each encounter became a small, private thrill, a secret I tucked away with growing anticipation. My husband remained unaware, caught in the current of his own concerns and distractions. His presence felt like a gentle buffer, a reminder of the life I had built and the limits I had set. But when he was gone, the house felt transformed, its rooms brimming with a possibility I could taste but not name. The boundaries of propriety grew thin, replaced by a restless longing that pulsed beneath my skin, making me ache for her attention, her approval, her touch. I told myself I was only being friendly, that I was just grateful for her help, but the truth crept in each time I caught her lingering glance or the shy tilt of her smile. As the days slipped by, desire became a shadow that followed us both through the house, silent and persistent. I found myself seeking her out, inventing excuses to be near her, to brush past her in narrow doorways, or stand a little too close at the kitchen sink. My dreams were filled with her scent, her laughter, the soft heat of her hand against my own. The anticipation was exquisite, sharp and aching, a secret pulse that grew stronger every day, threatening to break free and remake the contours of my world. It happened on a night that felt no different from any other. The house settled into its familiar silence, my husband away on business, my own routines comforting in their predictability. I sat at my desk with a cup of tea, sorting through emails, paying bills, letting the hours pass in gentle monotony. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioner and the steady tick of the clock on the wall. It was out of habit, not suspicion, that I opened the security app on my laptop, scrolling through the camera feeds to be sure everything was in order. I watched the ordinary images flicker by, the front porch, the empty hallway, the quiet sweep of the living room. When I clicked into the feed from my bedroom, I saw her. She was alone, moving with unhurried grace, her hands busy tidying the edge of the bed, smoothing the pillows with practiced care. I watched as she paused, glancing at the door, a moment of hesitation that seemed to draw out the tension in the room. Then, slowly, almost reverently, she reached for the set of lingerie I had left out that morning, a soft lace bra and matching panties, ivory and pale blue, delicate against the quilt. I had forgotten to put them away, But now, watching her fingertips linger on the straps, I wondered if forgetting had really been an accident. She held the bra up to the light, her expression tender and curious, brushing her thumb across the fabric as if savoring its texture. There was a vulnerability in her movements, a hunger that seemed almost innocent. With one last glance at the door, she slipped out of her blouse, letting it fall softly onto the bed. I felt my breath catch in my chest as she reached behind her back, unfastened her own bra, and replaced it with mine. She took her time, adjusting the straps over her shoulders, smoothing her hands over her sides. The lace fit her perfectly, hugging her curves, the pale blue a striking contrast against her warm skin. She stood in front of the mirror, turning this way and that, her eyes wide with a mixture of delight and disbelief. I could not look away. Desire and astonishment battled in me, embarrassment twisting with something deeper, richer, a secret thrill at the intimacy of the moment I was witnessing. She tried on the panties as well, shimmying them over her hips, running her fingers along the edges as she checked herself in the glass. Her body was both graceful and strong, each movement full of unspoken longing. She lingered in the mirror, watching herself, fingertips grazing the delicate lace, lost for a moment in her own reflection. The sight awakened something bold and wild in me, a pulse of heat that traveled low and urgent through my body. She touched her breasts through the thin fabric, exploring the new shapes, her eyes flickering closed for a heartbeat as she seemed to imagine a different life, a different skin. I realized I was trembling, heart pounding, as if I had intruded on something sacred. But instead of guilt, a wave of longing swept over me. Longing not just for her beauty, but for the courage in her vulnerability, the way she tried on my things as if hoping to understand me, or perhaps to be understood. As she dressed again, folding the lingerie with careful hands and returning it to its place, I closed my laptop, overwhelmed by 1,000 feelings at once. The boundaries I had drawn for myself, for us, seemed to blur and dissolve. I sat in the dark, the glow of the screen fading, my pulse echoing in my ears. That night, I lay awake in bed. The memory of her body and my clothes burned behind my eyelids, my skin alive with need, my heart racing with anticipation for whatever might come next. The morning after watching her on the camera, everything in my world felt unsettled and charged. I moved through the house in a daze, haunted by the memory of her body in my lingerie, the soft way she admired herself in the mirror, the innocence and boldness intertwined in her every gesture. My own skin felt hypersensitive, almost electrified, each movement reminding me of the desire that had flared inside me the night before. When she arrived for work, I found myself lingering in the hallway, listening for the sound of her voice, my heart racing at every quiet footstep. She moved through the rooms as usual, dusting shelves, straightening cushions, humming under her breath. But every time I saw her, my mind replayed that secret scene, the image of her body wrapped in lace, the way her hands moved over her own skin as if she were learning the meaning of touch for the first time. I couldn't help but watch her more closely now, studying the shape of her arms as she reached for a book, the way her hips swayed when she bent to tuck in the corner on a sheet, the slight pink flush at her neck when our eyes met and held just a little too long. The space between us grew tighter, thick with expectation and nerves. My body responded to her presence with a heat that surprised me, an ache low in my belly, a longing to reach out and close the distance between us. I caught myself inventing reasons to stay near her, folding laundry together, sorting through a box of old photographs, lingering in the kitchen as she wiped down the counter. Each accidental touch, her hand brushing mine as we passed, the soft bump of our shoulders, set off a spark that left my breath uneven and my heart unsteady. There was a moment, alone together in my bedroom, when the tension finally overwhelmed me. She was tidying a stack of clothes at the foot of the bed, her back turned, the memory of her bare skin in my lingerie fresh in my mind. I moved closer, so close I could feel the heat radiating from her body, smell the faint sweetness of her hair. I reached out and let my fingers graze her forearm, tentative and searching. She paused, her whole body going still, and I felt her tremble beneath my touch. The moment was fragile, balanced between fear and desire, the world narrowing to the two of us in the quiet room. I let my hand slide up her arm, over the gentle curve of her shoulder, exploring the warm skin exposed by her loose shirt. She turned to face me, her eyes wide and uncertain but shining with hope. Our faces were inches apart, breaths mingling, the charge in the air so palpable it made my skin tingle. I could not wait any longer. I cupped her face in my hands, marveling at the softness of her cheeks, the trembling of her lips. I traced the edge of her jaw, letting my thumbs drift to her mouth, feeling the way her breath caught at my touch. She leaned into me, seeking permission, surrendering to the moment. Our bodies met in a hesitant embrace, arms winding around waists, hands sliding under clothes. I pressed my lips to her neck, trailing kisses along the delicate line of her throat, down to the hollow of her collarbone. Her hands found my back, fingertips tracing the curve of my spine, pulling me closer, holding me with a strength that made me shiver. We moved together onto the bed, my sheets cool against feverish skin, her body pliant and eager beneath my own. My hands roamed over her, learning the landscape I had dreamed about, savoring the heat and the softness, the tiny shivers that rippled beneath my fingertips. I tugged her shirt over her head, exposing her bare skin to the morning light, traced the lines of her ribs, the dip of her waist, the curve of her breast. Her breath grew ragged, her body arching into my touch, surrendering every secret, every trembling ache. I kissed my way across her chest, tasting the salt of her skin, feeling her heart racing in time with mine. She responded in kind, hands and lips worshiping my body, awakening every hidden longing, every quiet hunger. The world outside fell away. Nothing left but the language of skin and breath and desire. I let myself be lost in her, each moment a revelation, each touch a promise. There was no fear, only the rush of freedom, the joy of finally closing the distance between us, of stepping beyond every boundary I had ever set for myself. We moved together in a slow, unhurried dance, savoring the closeness, the sweetness of newness, the wonder of being chosen, wanted, seen. When it was over, we lay tangled in the sheets, hearts still pounding, skin slick with sweat and satisfaction. The silence was different now, full and warm, woven with shared secrets and the certainty that nothing between us would ever be the same again. I closed my eyes and breathed her in, letting the memory of her touch settle deep inside me, anchoring me in the present, in the truth of what we had found. The line between us had disappeared, replaced by something real and shining and impossible to deny. Everything in my world changed after that day. The hush of routine was replaced by an undercurrent of anticipation, a delicious secret current running beneath the surface of ordinary life. She and I learned the language of glances and small gestures, how to share meaning in a fleeting touch or a smile hidden behind a cupboard door. Our intimacy was woven into the fabric of daily life, threaded through every moment we could steal from the eyes and ears of the world. It became a game, a ritual as intoxicating as it was dangerous, seeking out opportunities to be close, to brush against each other when no one was watching, to let a caress linger just a little too long. Even the mundane acts of homekeeping felt transformed, each chore charged with the memory of her skin against mine, the taste of her mouth, the warmth of her body pressed to me in the secrecy of my room. We developed a new rhythm, both careful and wild. When my husband was away or lost in work, I would leave out a favorite bra or a silk nightgown, an unspoken invitation for her to try it on, to let me watch in the mirror as she moved her hands over her own body and then mine. The anticipation would build through the day, the tension mounting with every shared look, every innocent question laden with hidden meaning. Sometimes, unable to wait, I would find her in the laundry room or the hallway and pull her into a closet, my mouth seeking hers, my hands tracing the familiar path down her spine, under her clothes, until I could feel her tremble against me. There were days when I watched her on the security feed, heart racing as she modeled my lingerie, stretching and preening in front of the mirror, turning and posing for her own delight, and now for mine. It was as if she was offering herself to me again and again, letting me see her at her most vulnerable, most beautiful. I memorized the shape of her hips in the curve of satin, the flush on her cheeks as she caught her own gaze, the way her hands explored the outline of her body with a confidence she never showed anyone else. Nights with her became a world apart, a separate life that lived in the hush between dusk and dawn. She would slip into my room when the house was quiet, the sheets still cool from the night air, her skin warm and soft beneath my fingers. We moved together without words, breathing each other in, mapping new territory with our mouths and hands. I learned her body by heart, the places that made her gasp, the hidden softness behind her knees, the secret rhythm of her heartbeat against my lips. Each encounter felt like a gift, both given and received, a private ceremony of pleasure and devotion. Our desire became a form of prayer, each kiss a promise, every embrace a confession. We explored each other as if for the first time, every time, discovering new ways to spark and satisfy the craving that never seemed to fade. Even when we were apart, I felt her in everything, the brush of her perfume on a scarf left behind, the ghost of her laughter in the empty kitchen, the memory of her breath against my neck when I lay awake in bed, longing for her return. My days were brighter, my body more alive, every nerve attuned to the possibility of the next secret rendezvous, the next shared shiver of anticipation. In those stolen hours, the rest of the world disappeared. I could be both who I had always been and someone entirely new, free, desired, unashamed, adored. The thrill of secrecy only made it sweeter. Our love story written in the margins of ordinary days, known only to the two of us. In the quiet between heartbeats, I found a happiness I never thought possible, and a longing that never truly left me, no matter how long we were apart. Happiness, I discovered, is not always loud or dazzling. Sometimes it is soft, secretive, a gentle warmth that pulses beneath the ordinary surface of a well-kept life. After everything changed between us, I learned to move through the world with a new kind of awareness, carrying our secret like a precious gem hidden in the folds of daily routine. On the outside, nothing about my life seemed different. I played the part of the devoted wife, the gracious hostess, the woman who always had everything under control. I smiled for neighbors, planned dinners, kept my husband company as he drifted in and out of his own world, never suspecting what shimmered just beneath my skin. Yet everywhere I went, I felt her, sometimes a physical memory, sometimes just the echo of her gaze or the electricity of her touch. Passing her in the hallway, I would let my hand brush hers for an instant, a fleeting promise. During chores, I would catch her eye across a crowded room, and a private smile would bloom between us, invisible to everyone else. Every day brought new opportunities for small rebellions, a note tucked into a coat pocket, a pressed flower left on a pillow, a knowing glance exchanged when no one else was watching. The boundaries of our love story were drawn in these tiny gestures, in all the moments we stole from the relentless flow of time and expectation. There was joy in the secrecy itself. The hiddenness of our affection made every meeting brighter, every touch sharper, every laugh more sincere. The anticipation of a few moments alone, the careful choreography of desire masked by routine, the wild, quiet hunger in the way she would linger over a chore or take an extra second to close the bedroom door. All of it added up to a happiness I had never known, a fullness that could not be taken away by the limits of circumstance. In the evenings, when the house was silent and I lay beside my husband, I would close my eyes and replay every detail of our hidden world. I would remember the way her lips tasted, the strength in her hands, the gentle way she touched me as if I were both fragile and invincible. I learned to cherish not only the nights we shared, but also the longing itself, the ache of waiting and the sweet ache of knowing she would return. Our love was never careless, never exposed to the cold scrutiny of others, but that only made it stronger, deeper, more real. With her, I discovered parts of myself I had left behind, desires I thought had faded with youth or routine. She brought color into the quiet rooms of my life, filled ordinary spaces with new light. Together, we created a refuge, a place within a place, where everything was allowed, where we belonged to each other outside of the world's gaze. As time passed, I realized that I did not need the world to understand or to approve. Our happiness was ours alone, a quiet treasure tucked in the shadows, a garden blooming in secret. I moved through my days knowing that every look, every whispered word, every hidden caress would stay with me, nourishing me long after the moment had passed. There was a beauty in this hidden joy, a sense of freedom in living for the love that thrived in the spaces no one else could see. I would never trade it, not for any sunlight or applause. In the shadow of secrecy, I finally learned what it meant to be truly, quietly, deeply happy.